the commentary of the Ohr Hachaim HaKadosh. The Ohr Hachaim has some few interesting things here about dreams. He talks about uh, uh, other understandings of the cause of why Yosef needed to, what was the reason why Yosef was imprisoned in Egypt uh, uh, for these seemingly another 2 years. In other words, the verse says it was at the end of 2 years that Pari had a dream, and ultimately Yosef was stuck in prison during this time. And what was the reason? What was the reason for that? And he talks a little about the dreams of Pharaoh, and how do you know if one of the dreams that you have is a true dream or not? So here let's begin. So the first insight of the Ohr Hachaim HaKadosh is that Ohr Hachaim says, it says in the pasuk by he Miketz, at the end of the 2 years, meaning 2 years from when the butler and the baker had their dreams, at the end of that time, Pharaoh had his 2 dreams. And the Ohr Hachaim has mentioned, we've seen this numerous times, based on the Gemara. The Gemara says, whenever it says Vayehi, it's a Lashon Tsar. It's a term used for pain or discomfort, something wrong, something negative is happening. So what is the Vayehi in this pasuk? What is the distress, the pain? So it says it's a Lashon Tsar. It's a term used for distress or pain. So the reason why it says Vayehi is because this is actually going to lead to the exile of Egypt. This brought the Jewish people into the Egyptian exile. So this is really, on the one hand, and I think this is where the Ohr Hachaim is sort of asking the thought that went through the Ohr Hachaim's mind to ask this question of Vayehi is because the verse and the story imply like this is a very good time. Joseph is now getting freed from prison, and he's going to become viceroy. So you may say that this was shouldn't have Vayehi. It should have some type of term used for simcha, like Vahaya, and then other terms used when it's a time of joy. And here it's used a time of tsar, of pain, and yet we're talking about Yosef getting out of prison, interpreting dreams, getting honored, becoming viceroy, etc. So on this, the Ohr Hachaim says, yeah, it's true for Yosef. This is maybe a time of joy for him. He's getting freed from prison, he's becoming viceroy. But at the same time, it's also a Lashon Tsar. And if you think about it on a global perspective or on a more communal perspective, it is a painful time because this is what's going to lead the Jewish people into the exile. And so therefore it uses the word Vayehi, which means which is a term used for tsar, for pain. And this term, Vayehi, is applicable here because it led the Jewish people into exile. Now, the Ohr Hachaim is bothered with the question. He says, but it didn't really start here, the concept of exile. It was already decreed from years before when Abraham was told that his children would be foreigners in a land that was not theirs, and they would enslave them and oppress them. So is this really the beginning of the exile? Or in a certain sense, it's, it started 100 years before? And the answer is, the Ohr Hachaim says that the actual exile, did start 100 years before in a certain sense, because that was when the decree was, and we know that it was 400 years, and we start counting it from way before. But Egypt was not necessarily going to be the one to be the enslaver, to be the one to put us in exile. It could have been another nation. We were meant to go to exile, but it wasn't necessarily going to be Egypt that would oppress us. And the fact that Egypt was the one who oppressed us, it was much worse. Egypt is called Ohr Hachaim, the iron crucible, the iron furnace. And this was
enthusiastically.
Wait, say that word again.
Enthusiastically. They get an
Enthusiastic.
extra little thing for the Marcus because they really took it on enthusiastically.
Okay, yeah. I thought you were saying a different word. They were passionate, enthusiastic about how they enslaved us. But the Ohr Hachaim takes it much further. That they were hisifu l'tzair yoser. They enslaved us and oppressed us much more than what the verse says, and the idea is that they embittered our lives, and they threw the newborn babies, they drowned the newborn babies, and so on, backbreaking labor. So we were meant to be in exile and to be enslaved, but not to that extent, and therefore, where does that actually begin? So this is the beginning of that of Pharaoh of Egypt being the one who's going to enslave us. It actually starts here. It starts here where Joseph is going to interpret the dream, and ultimately they are going to be the ones who enslave us. Now that the truth is that is an interesting thought, because it doesn't really begin. I mean, it leads to it, but it didn't necessarily have to happen that that the Jewish people would ultimately be enslaved here just because they came here. It was a different Pharaoh, according to one opinion at least. Vayakam melech chadash asher lo yadas Yosef, and there was a new Pharaoh that didn't know Joseph, and some say chadash mamish. So who says that this is really the beginning? I'm thinking out loud at this interpretation of Vayehi, that it's a lashon tsar, that this is the negative element over here, is because this is where it all began, and this is where until now a nation was going to enslave us. Now it's going to be Egypt. Really, this set it up that because Yosef he's going to interpret Pharaoh's dreams. Does this sort of make it engrave in stone the fact that Egypt is going to be the ones to enslave us? It's not really starting now. It's going to start later, after Joseph passes away, and that's when really the real Golus begins. So you could ask. I mean, the Ohr Hachaim gives other interpretations, but this is one he gives, that in a certain sense it starts here. And I'm just trying to figure out why would you think that this would be the Golus Mitzrayim, that it would be the severe Golus Mitzrayim would be considered to have started here, where it's actually good times and good days. Joseph becomes viceroy.
Wait a minute. Why Golus Mitzrayim? Just Golus. The fact that Abraham had owned the land but couldn't really own it. Now Yitzchok is living in the land and is fighting over the wells. He doesn't really own anything yet. If he does own it, nobody's recognizing it. They're still living there like they are interlopers. So that Golus has already begun with the birth of Yitzchok.
Right.
Now, they move to Mitzrayim, and now somebody's really being mishabed them. That's another level of Golus. They sank a little lower.
Right.
But it all began now.
It began earlier, really. It began by the Bris Bein HaBesarim in Avraham's time. And as you said, they didn't have any. And Hashem already had decreed that they're going to go to Golus. And then Joseph is now going to become viceroy. And this is going to lead the Jewish people into into the actual Golus of Egypt. So the Ohr Hachaim says that although the Golus began earlier, 100 years earlier, but this is a Lashon Tsar because this is where Egypt is the ones who are going to take over and be the enslaver. Until now, it could have been any nation. Now it sort of it engraves it that it's going to be Egypt who's going to be the one to enslave us. I don't know that they were locked in at this point to be the ones to enslave us. I would think that this led the Jewish people into Egypt, and if Egypt chose not to enslave us, somehow Hashem would have arranged that another nation would have enslaved us. In other words, why is this considered a Vayehi Lashon Tsar now at this point when Joseph is ultimately going to lead them to Egypt? But really, the decree started way before, and we're only looking at it now because now Egypt is being the ones who are becoming the main enslaver. They're choosing to enslave us, but they didn't really make that choice yet. It's really in the future. It's not finalized at this point. So
and the Ohr Hachaim mentioned,
what is that?
We moved to Goshen.
Okay.
Well, that's not. We moved into their territory. Now they have power over us. They're a bigger nation than us. We move into their land. Okay, they tolerated us in Goshen. It was only when we expanded out beyond Goshen that all of a sudden they said, look, they're growing like cockroaches, and we were. And they perceived us as a threat, and it's, you can make a whole natural story out of it, but it's the same thing. We lived ourselves alone with Hashem. And then we moved beyond to deal with an other. I call it a big other. There's you inside, and then there's the other. So which other do you want to have? In this case, the other was Mitzrayim. The Yidden lived amongst themselves. They had their own tents. They had their own kehillah. They had their own mikvahs. They had whatever they had. Now they're dealing with Egyptian speed laws and camel, travel restrictions and everything.
Anyway, Isaac, what you're saying is good. I just don't know if it's answering the question that I'm asking. Is the fact that the Ohr Hachaim is trying to explain the word Vayehi? He's trying to explain why
was this down? Because now, why is it a down? Why is it a negative? Because now, for the first time, we are dealing with Mitzrim. We didn't have any of that.
But the Ohr Hachaim says dealing with Mitzrim was only really bad when they enslaved us. The actual just going there wasn't necessarily terrible. It was
physically, but spiritually, I don't know. It's a big thing. I'm just saying, you want to know why these are bad times? Because we're out of our land dealing with Mitzrim. What else happened?
Rabbi, can I mention something?
Yeah. So in other words, you want to add to what the Ohr Hachaim is saying, that not only is it because of the physical pain, but you want to say the Kor HaBarzel is really the spiritual disgustingness of Egypt, the Egyptian environment, which was much worse than any other nation, which I guess would answer the question. It's just that the Ohr Hachaim seems to emphasize that it was Hisifu L'Tzair Yoser Mimasha Omar. In other words, more about he seems to be emphasizing physical pain. But I guess if you learn it that way, it does answer the question. If you want to learn it that it's the spiritual,
both.
The spirituality.
I'm not rejecting the physical
pain didn't start yet. There was no physical pain yet for another 100 years or so. It could be even a different pharaoh. That's what I'm saying. Like, how would you say that this is the Vayehi? But Moshe wants to say something. Moshe, what did you want to say?
Rabbi, they were taken over by the Hyksos? It was a different group. It was a different paro that acknowledged after Yosef. It was not the same group of people. It was a different order that took over. They're the Hyksos.
They invaded and they changed the ruling regime in Egypt. And they were the ones who were responsible for not recognizing Yosef. It's historically true.
Right. So in next week's parsha, or in Vayechi, actually, it's in Vayechi, where it mentions that Vayakom, or is it in Shemais actually? You know what? It must be. It's in Shemais, in the beginning of Shemais. But yeah, it's in Shemais. That's what it is. A new king got up, and Rashi says there's two interpretations. It's in Shemais. Two interpretations. A new king, that means really a new king, like I think like you're saying, Penina, Moshe. But there is another interpretation. He changed his rules. He got new rules. He pretended that we're starting a whole new changing our mode. And so according to that, I mean, even if it's the same king, but still it's a whole different mode. Till now, he was not necessarily was he planning on doing everything that he ended up doing then. He changed his whole mode. So I'm just saying, like, it's interesting that you would say Vayehi at this point when it wasn't even within his plans. I mean, at this point, he's giving Joseph, he doesn't have to make him viceroy. Like, you really see the opposite over here. He's making him viceroy, he's giving him great honor and great thing. Could have just given him a $200,000 salary. That would have been nice. Didn't have to make him viceroy, he's in a certain sense, I'm surprised that we're using the word Vayehi. At this point, Pare seems to be, offering Joseph free reign, like he's going to have his.
Rebbe,
yes.
At Purim, they invited everybody to the king's banquet.
Right.
Okay, where they observed kashrus, gave separate Mordechai and Haman with the wine stewards, and everything was glad kosher. And the Megillah starts with Vayehi. So
but there's a difference. Here, Pare doesn't even know what a Jewish person is.
I'm not talking about the future. I'm talking about you're mixing now. What does it mean on a higher level? I'm just saying, why is it Vayehi? You're looking now with hindsight to interpret the Vayehi. That's a different perspective and a different angle.
All right. Well, in any event, this is the first interpretation of the Ohr Hachaim, that it led them into Golus, and this is, of course, a sad thing especially because, or mainly that this is the beginning of Golus, because this is where the Yidden got stuck in this type of Golus, the Egyptian Golus, which was called the Ohr HaBarzel, the
had to deal with Egyptians.
So that's the first interpretation. Another interpretation is that the fact that the world is stuck in tsar, in pain, that is a painful thing for Hashem. So again, we're talking about it's Vayehi. This is somehow something negative, and seems to us like everything's positive here. We're going to have years of abundance. We're going to have Joseph's becoming viceroy. But the fact is, there's a dream here that's interpreting that there's going to be 7 years of famine, severe famine. And when people, not Jews, people are in pain, that is a lashon tsar for Hashem. How do we know that? Maybe it's only when Jewish people are in pain. How do we know that when the world is in pain, this is called tsar for Hashem? So that we have another Gemara, the Ohr Hachaim says in Megillah. The Gemara in Megillah says that it brings from the Gemara there that it says V'loi korav zeh el zeh, that there's a term used by Kriyas Yamsuf that one group did not reach the other group. The Egyptians didn't reach the Jewish people, but the Gemara interprets that simple. That's the simple meaning of the verse. The Gemara says that what the deeper meaning of the verse is that not that the Egyptians didn't reach the Jewish people, even though they were chasing after us, they didn't reach us. But the Gemara's interpretation is that the angels didn't reach each other. They wanted to have groups singing Shira, praising Hashem at the sea. And they were going to sing Hashem's praise, that the splitting of the sea. And that praise Hashem, he's saving the Jewish people, he's killing the Egyptians. And what did Hashem say? Maaseh Yodai Hovim Bayam Va'atem Oimrim Shira. The work of my hand, my handiwork, is drowning in the sea, and you people, you angels, are singing Shira, meaning that it was inappropriate for the angels to sing Shira, to praise Hashem at that time when the people were drowning. And who are these people who are drowning? Evil Egyptians. These were Goyim, the worst of the worst. And yet, the fact that they were drowning, Hashem said, these are the work of my hand, and they are, and you should not be, don't sing Shira. So in other words, it is still a tsar, even though the plague of famine did not exactly pain the Jewish people so severely, but the world is in pain from a famine, and that was considered a reason to say Vayehi, that it's a lashon of tsar, a term used for pain. Then comes the next interpretation. The next interpretation is that it's talking about the pain that Joseph felt. So the first one was about going to exile, the Jewish people going to exile. Second one is the world is going to suffer from famine. And now the third interpretation is that Joseph is now finishing his 2 years, extra 2 years of being imprisoned. And he really should have been freed 2 years earlier. And the reason he was not freed 2 years earlier, when he interpreted the dreams of the Sar Hamashkim and the Sar Ha'ifim, the cup bearer's dream and the baker's dream, and he interpreted it, he should have been freed then. But the reason he wasn't was because he said, Ki'im zichartani, if only you remember me. And what was the actual pasuk over there? It's right at the end of last week's parsha. That it's he tells the Sar Hamashkim, I didn't do anything here, and he says you should do a kindness with me. His kartani. He says in verse 14 in last week's parsha, chapter 40, he says, Kiyam zachartani. What is that? Yeah, but I have to tell you what the words he said, because this is the Ohr Hachaim's point, is that he said the word Kiyam zachartani, if only you'll remember with you, as I did good to you, and you should do for me kindness. His kartani, and he says again, and mention me to Paroi. So he says him twice to mention Ki im zichartani, and then again his kartani. So I want you to remember me and mention and have me taken out of this house. So the Ohr Hachaim says, based on a medrash, that why was he stuck 2 more years? Because he says Zachartani and his Kartani. If you remember me and mention me to Pharaoh, he got punished for that, and he got stuck 2 years.
He did neither.
The butler didn't mention him to Pharaoh.
Either one.
Well, maybe he remembered him.
It says Vayishkocheyu.
He forgot him, right? But no, true. Okay. It says Vayishkocheyu la'achar mikan, right? He forgot him. But Yeah. I mean, the commentaries say that after some time he forgot him, but in any event, yeah, he did forget him, even in his heart. They talk about it exactly. Um, uh, to what extent that because he decided not to remember him, he forgot him even in his heart, and so on. Anyway, bottom line is that because of these two words that Yosef had said to the cupbearer, that he should mention him and remember him to Pharaoh, so he got stuck an extra 2 years in prison, and he suffered. And that's why it says Vayehi, symbolizing pain of the pain, the distress that Yosef had of being 2 extra years in prison in Egypt. And that's what it means, that Vayehi, it's hinting to the pain that Yosef experienced from those 2 years. And then the Ohr Hachaim says that according to this, you could explain the pasuk a little differently. Vayehi, and it was Miketz, from the Yetzer Hara, who's called Kates, because of Kates, Miketz, because of the Yetzer Hara, he got stuck Shnasayim Yamim. He got stuck 2 years. So the Yetzer Hara is called Kates, like the word Kates called Basar, the end of all flesh, which is referring to the Ohr Hachaim, to the Yetzer Hara, as the Ohr Hachaim explains over there. And so Kates, from the Yetzer Hara, he caused 2 years. That caused the extra 2 years for Yosef to be stuck in prison. Now, what does this all mean? What this all means is that Yosef was on a very high level tzaddik. It was on such a high level that he was expected to reach a level. He was expected to be on a level even higher than Yaakov, his father. Why was he expected to be on a level higher than Yaakov Avinu? Because Yosef was not just like the ordinary individual who's expected to have full faith in Hashem. And at the same time, we're supposed to make proper receptacles and vessels for God's blessings to come. So, for example, if chas v'shalom, someone is in a bad situation, they should try to get out of it. Yosef is not that way. Hashem didn't want Yosef to try to get out of it. Hashem's claim to Yosef is, no, you're a tzaddik that's supposed to believe that the Eibusha is going to take you out, and you don't have to make any vessel whatsoever to get out. You are on a level of a tzaddik elyon, like a heavenly tzaddik, that you're higher than Yaakov. Yaakov made plans of how to save himself. He divided his camp into 2 camps in order, why? To make a vessel to save himself. But Yosef, no, Yosef was on this high level tzaddik that you're not supposed to make plans of how things are going to work and how God's blessings will express themselves. You are on a level of a tzaddik, of a righteous person that doesn't even make such plans. And therefore, when Yosef made a mistake and he told the cupbearer, I want you to remember me to Paroi, guess what happened? That was the Yetzer Hara that was telling him to remind me to mention me to Paroi. And he got punished because of it, because he was supposed to have a higher level of bitachon in Hashem than a regular person, than even a tzaddik person. He was supposed to have a level, such a high level where he doesn't even have to make any ishtadlus, any plans, any way of trying to make a vessel, a receptacle for Hashem's blessing to manifest itself. No, he was supposed to go totally relying on Hashem, and he didn't, and therefore he got punished. The punishment was for those 2 words that he said, and therefore he got stuck in prison for an extra 2 years. And this is the Vayehi, this is the painful, this is why this is a time of pain that it took, that he was stuck 2 extra years. Yes, Mordechai.
In Zevin's book of Hasidic tales, it's on the pasuk. It says that Yosef later regretted that he had asked for the favor, and David that it would be forgotten. And he illustrates with the story about a grandson of the Baal Shem Tov didn't have what to eat, and so when he was in shul or whatever, or he said, "Is it possible that the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov shouldn't have what to eat?" And those president said that they would take up a collection, and then when he got home, he said to himself, "What have I done?" And he davened that they forgot. He davened that they should forget that they were going to take up a collection for him, and they did.
Wow. Right. So anyway, yeah. So that was that's this idea about Yosef. Okay. So now. So that's a little explanation of how Yosef was punished, which of course sounds surprising why he would be punished for asking the butler to remember him to Pharaoh. Like, what's wrong with that? But that's because we're thinking on our terms. But on such a high level tzaddik, he was supposed to have total trust in Hashem. Okay, so that's the third interpretation of the Ohr Hachaim HaKadosh about Vayehi. Now, and now the Ohr Hachaim mentions as follows. With this interpretation, we understand why how the 2 years, it was at the end of 2 years, meaning it was 2 years from the cupbearer's dream. Now, why does the Torah say that? What's the connection, the cupbearer's dream, in this 2 years? So that's why it's emphasizing it, because that's the cause of this whole thing. So in other words, why are we starting this count of 2 years? It was at the end of 2 years. It means from the dream. That we know, but like, why do we need to know that? And so he's saying, because now we understand how this came about, that he got these 2 years added because of that story. So that's why we're connecting the two things. And when did that story happen? And so the story happened. It was the story is the stories of the previous dreams, and these dreams are actually the idea that Yosef wanted to be remembered, and because he said it twice, so each time Hashem forgot, each Rosh Hashanah, which is the time of remembrance, so to speak, Hashem punished him not to remember him, so to speak. In other words, he was asking to remember me, and this is the extra. He got stuck 2 years from that dream, from that time, because his request to remember me ended up in a punishment of not being remembered on the day of Rosh Hashanah, which is the time of remembrance, and it was basically measure for measure. Now, what it seems that the Ohr Hachaim is saying here is that he's connecting it with another Gemara. There's another Gemara that says that when Yosef was freed from prison, it was Rosh Hashanah. So what we see is that 2 years earlier was also Rosh Hashanah, meaning the day that it was. The cupbearer was freed was also Rosh Hashanah, to remember him, and that would have been 2 years earlier on Rosh Hashanah. But because he mentioned it to the cupbearer, so he got, instead of being remembered, he got this punishment, so to speak, of not being remembered. So that's it's still connected to this idea of Yosef being stuck 2 years, and it's just adding this idea that it's it sort of explains why Yosef was, or why the pasuk is connecting the stories together. Why do we need to know that this story happened 2 years after the other story, right? It doesn't really necessarily affect us, but it gives an understanding now that we know that it's one is connected to the other because it was all about the story there caused this next story of Yosef being stuck for the 2 years, and now he's going to be able to be freed. And then Ohr Hachaim makes a final point that it says Miketz Shnasayim, that that at the end of 2 years, that it's telling us that Paro's dream and the bearer of the cup and the baker, those dreams, look at all these dreams, they all came true. And so what it's really saying is that those dreams and this dream were on the same day, and that shows us that dreams that happen on Rosh Hashanah are a sign that they are meaningful. That's what it seems like he's saying, that Miketz Shnasayim, that in this time, it's a time that the dream will tell something true, and it's not conveying, it's not giving over shav, falsehoods. It seems like a dream of Rosh Hashanah is more of a for telling something true. So this is a little secret about dreams on Rosh Hashanah, that it's also hinting to this. That again, the Ohr Hachaim is sharing with us another dimension of the Torah, that it's the time that. So what it seems like is Yosef is freed from prison on Rosh Hashanah, which means that the night before is when Pharaoh had the dream, and that the seemingly the same story is with the cup. Well, I don't know. Maybe it means a few days later. In other words, were the dreams were both on Rosh Hashanah? No, Yosef was freed on Rosh Hashanah, so it must have been that the dream. And if the Ohr Hachaim is saying that the dreams come true on Rosh Hashanah, so it must be that day he had the dream. So the dreams that the butler and the baker had seemingly were also on Rosh Hashanah, and therefore those dreams are dreams that are a good sign. There's a good chance that they'll come true. It seems to be it's a time that dreams are giving true statements. But what it sounds like is that had Yosef not said these words about remember me, he would have been freed on that day, even before the butler got out of prison. In other words, he got stuck 2 years. Seemingly, 2 years earlier would have been the exact day of Rosh Hashanah. So seemingly he would have been freed that day. The butler wasn't going to get freed till Pharaoh had his birthday. Which was 3 days later. It was 3 days later when Paro is going to remember you. Yom Huledes as Paro. So seemingly, Yosef would have even been freed before that had he not said it. That's what it seems like, right? It says, he makes a party and he remembers the Sarah Mashkin. But the dream he had was 3 days earlier on Rosh Hashanah, and Yosef interprets the dream the next 2 years later on Rosh Hashanah, and that because Yosef is freed from prison on Rosh Hashanah, and the dreams are happening on Rosh Hashanah. So
who had the dream? Who had the dream Rosh Hashanah?
All of them: the Sarah Mashkim, Sarah Oifim, the butler, the baker, and Pharaoh.
All on the same night.
That's what it seems like.
Oh,
Miketz Shnasayim, that hu haya bizman atzmoi shechol musar mashkim musar oifim. It was that time itself that they had a dream, which is a time that a chaloim speaks truth. Unless you want to say it's not exactly the same day, but it's.
I'm saying that it took about 2 years.
It's 2 years later.
They went through 2 years worth of dinners until they got around to the rest of the story. I'm trying to imagine what life was like in Mitzrayim during those 2 years. Who was commanding what about whom?
For Yosef or for the king?
For everybody. You can look at it from different perspectives.
The baker was killed. The butler was with the king, and they were just running life as usual.
Wait a minute, wait. The baker was killed when? He just told the story to Yosef? He had the same dream the same night?
When he
the
dreamt
next
that
morning
night,
he told Yosef?
3 days later, Parai was made the calculation of this one I'm gonna keep, but that one's gonna go. And that was the story.
So Yosef, I thought you had to wait 2 years from the time that he had the dreams. If you're saying they all had the dreams on the same night, let's just go through it like on a calendar. Let's schedule this out.
The butler and the baker had the same exact night dream. 2 years later, on the same day, but 2 years later, Parai had two dreams.
The 2 years later. Day, 2 years later, Paro had it. Okay.
And the Ohr Hachaim says it's a sign that these are true dreams. In other words, dreams of Rosh Hashanah seem to be true dreams.
So Parai did not have them killed in the interim.
No, he did. He had the baker killed. The butler was given back his position, and the baker got killed.
Was his birthday. 3 days later was the Paro's birthday.
Paro's birthday.
That's when the guy got hung, and that's when the butler was returned back to his place.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So
and then the rest of the 2 years passed. Okay.
Right. Exactly. Now the thing is that the Ohr Hachaim is saying. So why are we saying that this is 2 years later than the previous story? So the answer that the answer that the Ohr Hachaim is giving now is, in addition to, of course, to what he's explained before, he's adding another point that, you know why it's saying it was exactly 2 years later? To tell you that dreams of Rosh Hashanah seemingly come true. Okay, now comes the next Ohr Hachaim. Next Ohr Hachaim, next insight, is Parai dreamed. And the Ohr Hachaim is very bothered with this this concept of Parai cholein. He's dreaming. He's in the middle of dreaming. We're talking about a story that happened a while back. So seemingly, it should have said that Parai cholam, vayachaloim Parai. Parai choleim is an interesting current, almost like he's dreaming. Well, why is it mentioned that he's dreaming currently?
He woke up in his dream.
It said that he had multiple times he had the same kind of dream, but no matter what.
Or he was dreaming that he was dreaming.
So you're saying something very valuable, Ezra, because the Ohr Hachaim is going to sort of like talk about that. But from the pasuk, it just says, from the psukim, it just seems like he had these dreams. He had one dream and then another dream. But the Ohr Hachaim learns that he actually had these dreams every single night. And the Ohr Hachaim, he says that first you have the Sar HaMashkim and the Sar HaOifim, and meaning the cupbearer, the butler, the baker, they had those dreams in the story. And on that story comes that Parai was also cholein. He was dreaming, meaning that even if the butler did not want to mention Yosef, as Yosef wanted him to, Hashem made that Paro would also have his own dreams, and therefore he would be forced to mention Yosef, because there was no one else who could interpret dreams except Yosef, and the butler would end up needing to tell Paroi, by the way, there is someone who knows how to interpret dreams. So Hashem had Paroi dreaming his dreams every night, numerous times. I don't know, numerous times every night, but at least every night, meaning numerous times over 3 years. And so the meaning of the pasuk is, V'loy zachar sar hamashkim, the butler did not remember Yosef, and it was after 3 years, and Paroi was dreaming this dream, and so the sar hamashkim was forced against his will to tell Paroi that there's a Hebrew youth that's he can interpret the dream for you. So, in other words, Paroi was having this dream, which was going to, which would have forced the butler to remember Yosef. And the understanding here seems to be that Hashem was making Paroi have this dream in order to
mind the butler.
Yeah, in order to be like a force.
The butler can ignore it and ignore it and ignore it, but if every day he serves the king his wine to make him relax, if every day the king is getting more and more mishiga, and he's standing there listening to him because this dream he had, sooner or later, the solution's going to pop into his head, even if it's a goyish cup.
So the idea is that he would have this reminder when the king is revealing to his workers, to his officers, I had a crazy dream. Ultimately, that's going to make the butler remember. Maybe as Isaac is adding to this, embellishing.
I'm not adding. I'm just saying it. I'm expressing it in a common language. What am I adding?
Well, that it's because he gives the wine and he's supposed to.
No, wait. Who is he? He's the wine. He's the wine tender. Does that mean he listens to the king, looking for the slightest thing that to give him cover? What else is he doing there all the time?
He's mixing wines. He's getting the best wine, trying to tell him which wine would be perfect.
He's checking to see if it's poison.
Yeah, not now.
I don't know.
Well, when did he say it now? He said it now.
No, Isaac, I'm not disagreeing. I think
I'm just saying.
I think you added a nice little. I think it adds a little understanding.
Yeah.
It's possibly, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying
something inspired him after a short period of time to say chotasi, or eshkach, whatever it is, chatai.
Yes,
whatever he says.
So anyway, the Chaim basically is adding over here the idea that Paroi was dreaming this numerous times. That's what he's adding to the story. And why did Hashem make him have this? Because this is going to be what's going to cause the butler to remember. So in other words, it wouldn't be subject to the butler's memory, but would ultimately be, he would be forced to bring up Joseph's expertise of interpreting dreams. Now comes the Ohr Hachaim, and he says, I'm sorry,
I have a question. Okay, so we know that Hashem punished Yosef for asking a commoner to remember him, etc. So if the punishment was such, so why didn't Hashem come to Paro in the same way that he did, with all these dreams, and have, him see the face, just like Yosef saw his father's face see the face of this youth and ask the question, this face keeps on popping up. Have you seen someone with this particular face? That would have been Hashem basically saying to Yosef, I'm the one who's saving you. The way that it's presented right now, it's as if, the butler comes up and says, oh boy, did I screw up, I forgot, and etc., etc. So it looks like the butler in some way actually saved Yosef and kept his promise, quote unquote.
All right. You were God, you do it better.
In other words, what you're asking is, why are we giving credit almost to the butler?
I'm asking if Hashem is in fact punishing Yosef for the fact that he asked a mere man to remember, why didn't Hashem come to Paro in a dream, just like he's done with the other two dreams,
right?
With the place. And
so Hashem would have saved Yosef 2 years earlier without the, if not for the fact that Yosef asked. No, it was Yosef's fault, so to speak. He listened to the Yetzer Hara, that he asked this person to remember him to Paro. Had Yosef not asked, Hashem would have somehow arranged that Yosef would be freed. And in fact, according to the next interpretation, which seems very connected, he says that, see, the previous one was of the understanding that Paro was dreaming repetitive over a period, over this time. The next interpretation is he had the dream. I mean, it seems also that it was repetitive. No.
Every day versus every year.
No. You know what? I have to take it back. The previous interpretation maybe wasn't. I was remembering when I reviewed this before. It's really the next interpretation that I was saying now in the first interpretation. Let me tell you the new interpretation. It's connected to what I was just saying. That's really the interpretation that I was sharing with you. The earlier one seemed not to be emphasizing this point. This interpretation is that Paro had this dream like Tmidus every night. He was always constantly having this. But he would wake up and he was unaware that he had a dream. The end of 2 years, he dreamed. In this time, he didn't forget the dream. What is the meaning behind this? The meaning behind this is that Yosef could have done tshuva for what he sinned. If he did tshuva, what would have happened is the day that he did tshuva, Paro would have woke up and remembered the dream. Instead, he didn't do tshuva, so Paro every morning would wake up and forget that he had this dream. At the end of 2 years, now it's time, his punishment is up. Now, Paro actually is going to remember his dream, and Yosef is going to finally be revealed. So that's the interpretation. It's the second interpretation. And that's what I was really referring to.
And even more annoyingly, he will remember that he's had it every night for 2 years, but never remembered it. Why not? If he's remembering, he's remembering. I'm not adding anything, but can imagine how upset he is and how desperate he is to get a dream person in there to give him a resolution for this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the way you understand it is now he has a retroactive memory that he remembers now all the times that he had it and forgot it. Now he actually remembers that he had it all those years.
That too.
He doesn't emphasize.
He remembers the dream and says, "That's the story."
I've been having this for two. I had this dream already 700 years, 12 years,
times,
720 something years, 30 years
times. And if I woke up in the middle of the night, I had it twice.
But yeah, anyway, the main point is that the Ohr Hachaim is saying the reason why it says choylem is because Hashem was really prepared, to free Yosef right away. I think that's the emphasis here, that Yosef, he was prepared to free Yosef all along. It was Yosef that made this mistake, but Hashem, if he did tshuva, Hashem would have had it. It's almost like Mashiach, that Hashem has someone who's ready to be Mashiach. We just tip the scale. Hashem will let him reveal himself. Here also, Hashem will make him, remember the dream, and he'll be able to. Yosef will be revealed. So it's just that it's that moment of tshuva that we need that will fix the whole problem. Okay, we're gonna stop here. Sei gesund, everyone. Have a freilichen Chanukah.